Broadcasting from Washington, D.C., this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me is co-host Johan Oberg. Johan, welcome back to the show. How's it going today?
Thanks, Chris. It feels like an ancient since I was on the show, but it have been a few weeks. Good to be back. How you doing back in the States?
It is good. Insider's Guide to Energy is now broadcasting out of Washington, D.C., yet we still have our Swiss connection with you sitting in Zurich. I'm looking forward to today's episode. It's been a while since you and I have done an episode together, so this is a good thing.
I think it is. And what is equally as interesting is that we're tying it back to where we kind of started, this interaction between energy and digital transformation and energy transformation. So it's quite interesting that once we haven't done a show for a couple of weeks, we go back a little bit to where we kind of started out from.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk a bit about energy transition, a little bit focused on Europe. Now, having been back in the U.S. for a couple of months now, you and I were talking earlier today, and I was saying it's a bit different. People looking at the energy transition have a different feel or conversation. So I'm looking forward to get more of a European perspective in this conversation today. So why don't I turn it over to you to kick us off?
All right. So then I think the best thing to do that is to bring the guests on. That's usually what helps. So welcome to the show, Tobias Mitter, CTO and MD of gridX.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Chris. My pleasure to be here today. Thanks for having me on the show.
Perfect. We usually say this. We know a little bit about you. We had the opportunity to research and do a pre-call with you and discuss a few things. But some of our audience might not know who you are and might not know gridX. So quick introduction. Who is Tobias and who is gridX?
So I'm the CTO and one of the two MDs of gridX. And gridX is a company that provides a white label energy management platform where you can connect different decentral energy resources like battery charging stations and so on, and manage them in a way that you achieve either self-sufficiency or make use of time of use tariffs, for example. And I've been in the energy industry for a while. Worked for E.ON, which is an energy utility, and also some e-mobility and also tech scale-ups before that.
So here's first personal question. I have to start with this one because I think we all three have the same kind of background in different stages where we started off in a separate industry and kind of emerged into the energy industry. So what kind of made you from being the consultancy from the tech startup, then moving into the energy industry? What was the big opportunity, or what would intrigue you to do this step?
Yeah, everyone is about talking about making energy smart, right? So we all know that it's crucial to make our societies and communities greener and more sustainable. And it's a really hard thing to do. And in the end, it's all about data. So when I looked at the different projects and clients I worked with in the past, what always got me excited was when it's not only about technology, but also about creating an impact. And that's where I felt the energy transition and bringing digital together with energy resources is a super exciting field to be in. That's why I got engaged there over the couple of last years and ended up with gridX right now.
And I would assume that talking about it, as Chris mentioned in the opening of this one, we're broadcasting this and we have an audience about 50-50 in the US and Europe. If we look at Germany, which was early out in terms of the wind and also in their decision of the nukes, I guess it's an interesting market to be in as maybe not leader, but at least a big transition right now.
Absolutely, Johan. And Europe in total is really energizing right now when it comes to the energy transition. So Germany has been a bit on the slow side, to be honest, in Europe. As if you look into the Nordics, like Sweden, for example, or Denmark, they've been a bit more progressive in introducing dynamic time of use tariffs, for example, to also give incentives to consumers to participate in the energy transition, where we in Germany have been a bit slow in picking this up with smart meters, but it's absolutely an exciting place to work on the energy transition right now.
So that brings up a point. The average European, what do they think or know about the energy transition, and how should they be engaged?
This varies interestingly widely across the different European countries. So when I talk to my friends in Sweden, for them it's totally normal since a couple of years that you go on your app and you check when you charge your electric vehicle, for example, or even when you run smaller loads like a washing machine, depending on market prices. And then, so there is a lot of awareness, and also it's just part of everyday life, yeah, to work with flexible energy. In other markets like Southern Europe or also Germany, people still need to get educated on how to use energy in a more flexible way, and also to trust smart systems to, for example, make decisions on when to charge their car or when to charge their battery at home. So it's a lot of education still across Europe. And to be honest, the regulation differs a lot in European countries, and this hasn't helped. But we see a very good momentum over the last 1 to 2 years, also stemming from the energy crisis in Europe, that the regulation as well as the common perception on the energy transition and also smart energy management is moving absolutely in the right direction. And also the numbers that show the increase in adoption of solar, for example, and adoption of EVs are pointing in the right direction.
So I guess one thing that you said that makes me scratch my head is you said in the Nordics they kind of use an app to decide when to do their laundry or charge their car. Um, with AI and so much going on, why would I care? Why wouldn't it just happen at the right time and the least expensive time for me? Why do I have to get involved in that? It's just one more thing to worry about.
Absolutely, and you're hitting a very important point, Chris. So we also see that in the Nordics, a lot of the players are moving to apps that do this job for you. So in the past, when there were early adopters, installing their first solar and also being interested in it, this was a lot of manual work sometimes. And nowadays, we see with the broader adoption, many of the people don't care what the system does. They just want a good outcome. So they want to charge when it's cheapest, and they want to make sure that their energy bill is as low as possible. So indeed, a lot of the players, including gridX, are moving into automated optimization for dynamic time of use tariffs, for PV forecasts, etc., to take this manual management away from the user and make it as automated as possible.
And then,
which I think is a normal step. I think being Scandinavian, coming from Sweden, I used to have the Eon app, for example. I think it was Eon, if I'm not mistaken, which one you can go in and have a look at whatever utilities in your home could do. And it was fun for about 2 hours because then you realize you have 2,000 apps on your screen. And then why do I need to know this? I think that's changed a little bit in the last year. Maybe not with the app, but especially because you put more focus on your energy prices. So where do you see this let's put it last 12 months, which has been a roller coaster for at least for a consumer of energy? Do you see any big differences here in terms of that development now?
Yeah, so we've seen that especially with news like negative energy prices, we've seen a very different perception also, and also a consumer approach towards renewables, and also an expectation of companies to serve that demand for renewable energies better. So while self-sufficiency was one of the major use cases in the past and is still a big use case, especially flexibility and dynamic time of use have picked up recently. And we see a lot of conversations, not only in the Nordics, but also in other European countries, around flexibility, how to bring this to customers. And we already see some very innovative tariffs being brought out by energy companies that also make sure that you benefit as a customer from flexibility tariffs without taking the full risk. And of course, the energy companies also having their share on this. So we see really a lot of exciting new models, which hopefully will drive also a wider adoption.
You talk about new models and flexibility through the European energy transition. How does going from a centralized to a decentralized kind of um, ecosystem change things, and how does that impact the management and using the software?
So there are a couple of uh, things I would like to point out there. The first one is a very practical one. So in Germany, when the energy, especially the gas prices, have been rising over the last winter, a lot of people turned to heat pumps and to other renewable energy resources and thought about buying some of them. We do have some areas in German cities where it's not as easy to connect big new renewable assets like a heat pump because the energy grid is not capable of taking these new devices online. So there is a significant complexity brought by the continued electrification of heat, but that hits the grids right now. And as it takes quite some time to expand and to update grids, we need to, in addition to upgrading grids, also find a way to smarter manage how these new big decentral energy resources then are connected to the grid. And one way that will start to do this, which will start in Germany next year, is that also the grid companies are allowed to send signals to energy assets to lower their consumption for a certain amount of time to maintain grid stability and to basically avoid blackouts and grid instability in the end. So that's really one very exciting and also quite a big challenge across Europe to have to combine this very very fast momentum of adding renewable energy resources to the grid and the in comparison to that, quite slow pace of updating the grids to work with that. The second point I would like to point out is also that if you add PV and solar batteries and also a charging station to your home, they usually don't talk to each other. So to get the full benefit out of it, you also need to find ways to make those devices speak to each other and also manage all those data points that come from these devices. And just to give an example, to do effective energy management on a local level, you need to look at least 1 or 2 second measurements from each of these devices, compare those, and then take management decisions based on that. So that's a huge complexity just on a level of a local home. And if you then scale this across the grid, this is a really interesting field and quite a big challenge to be in. And that's also what gridX is working on, to connect all those devices and process all those managements.
So I think this is an interesting thing. When I looked at the consumer market, if we say that you're going to get solar to your home and you've got your EV plugged in, and we're not talking about the fleet, but we're talking about single. How do you see this maybe with your expertise from the German market? I just see very differently from where I lived in Sweden, where the majority is owned. So you own your flat or you own your house, whereas where I live in Switzerland, where the majority is rental, and that has a big impact on the energy transition in terms of what you can do and what you're willing to do. So how maybe can you explore a little bit on how you see this as maybe possibilities or challenges, and specifically maybe with Europe or with Germany in focus?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think that is one of the big next things we need to tackle. Right now, there's a lot of focus on homeowners. So where you're either renting or even owning a home, where you are in full control of what you want to install and how you want to run it. But of course, the majority of people also in Germany, similar to Switzerland, is renting and is living either in a rented apartment or a rented building, a rented house. And there it can be quite difficult right now to install your own solar or your own charging station. However, we see this changing. So the small things like putting a very small PV on your balcony, including a battery, already starts to get some traction of adoption across Germany. I think not many had this on their radar, that this very small scale um, decentralized energy assets can become a thing. But this is starting to happen. And what we see at the same time, and what I hope will happen in more European countries, is that also the regulator allows this kind of small scale assets to be connected to the grid and to be also installed at home, where there were some restrictions in the past, which then also help people not owning their own home or owning their own apartment to install renewables.
So you've got that image in my mind of all those little satellite dishes across apartment buildings everywhere that weren't too sightly. Now I'm seeing tons of solar panels on the side of an apartment building. Don't know if I'm excited about that, but I guess from the renter or the tenant's perspective, what kind of value could they get by putting a small, if they have a south, I assume you have to have a southern facing balcony to do this. But you put a small solar panel out there. What's the economics of this?
Yeah, the economics are like shaving off a little bit of your energy bill. It doesn't really gets you in the same area of savings that we see when you own a full home and you get to 80% self-sufficiency. You're far away from that, of course, when you do like the smaller balcony um, installments. But it is, I think, if you look at it from an adoption perspective and also from a mindset perspective, it is great that also people can participate, even if they just have a small apartment, by at least shaving some euros off their energy bills. And from a grid perspective and an overall energy transition perspective, this gets interesting the more of those smaller solar panels get added to the system. However, I think also renters should or landlords should make sure that they don't miss out on the opportunity to think about what can they offer their renters in an apartment building, for example, because it seems that there will be also regulation around that people have a right for their own charging station even if they just rent out in an apartment building. And if you are smart as a landlord, you can also use this to your advantage by installing systems that the renters can use, but at the same time, for you as a landlord, for example, allow you to market this kind of flexibility, which is becoming quite a thing now in Nordics as well as in Germany.
So I guess I can see landlords maybe becoming small utilities, for lack of a better term, by putting some solar or some other renewable in to sell, pass it down to their tenants. But I guess that brings up to my mind smaller firms, and generally utilities have been large. You've had big turbine plants in Germany, maybe coal or gas turbines running. How are things changing in the European market towards smaller firms? Is that a thing? In how has it changed the game?
So we see smaller firms, if they have like space on their building or a space around their office buildings, for example, or production buildings, setting up their own not industry scale, but then business scale PV, for example, so meaning solar or also charging stations. So and what we see is are players coming in who also offer to companies to connect this kind of setups, and then also market this kind of flexibility and market the energy production that comes from it, so that also companies can benefit. So the best case, it's a win-win. So the company saves on their energy bill and can provide, for example, green energy to their customers to charge the cars over during the workday, and at the same time any additional energy that is not used can be marketed, and the company can benefit from it. So we see this, but it again also depends on local regulation, how fast it's being picked up and installed.
My only fear, if I can throw that in, is that when we look at this whole energy transition, we start looking at the dependency on regulations and incentives, which is one thing, and we probably need that to drive something. But the only thing that I'm worried about, we look at the personal, the solar on the balcony, but even smaller firms, is that right now it's energy is a high priority topic within organizations and within society in general, especially in Europe after the last year with the energy prices been soaring. The challenge I have is, will this continue? We might go into a recession. We might do so. So the whole novice of this whole thing is like, well, energy might not be number one priority. It might not be top 5 next year. And that means that we're going to lose out on this unless we make this transition more relevant. And I guess for small firms in pricing. And how do you see that? And maybe as a follow-up question to this one is, who are your customers that then are driving this? Because I'm quite interested, as Chris mentioned in the beginning, on the business model, but maybe a little bit in terms of how do you see that philosophical question, or whatever we call it in the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an excellent question, Johan, because we already see in Germany that the energy shock of last year is wearing off. Yeah, so also the customers are a little bit less intrigued. I mean, there's still good momentum, but they're less intrigued than last year to jump on renewables because the gas prices have been kept by the regulator. So there is less pressure to move to renewables, and this translates then also into less momentum in some customer groups. So where will this, how will this develop from a priority next year? I think that's really hard to tell. Also with the current conflicts across the globe, also impacting energy prices potentially. So, which brings me to your second point, that we believe at gridX that it is super important to show the value of moving to renewable energy resources. And there in the past hasn't been like the biggest focus on to explain it in simple terms. So people who were engineers themselves or who were interested in building up their solar at home, they pretty much knew and could calculate themselves what's the return on investment and at what point in time do I earn money from it. But for regular consumers, that was really quite tedious to do so. So now we are moving into a new stage where we see some companies offering very aggressive electricity tariffs, for example, that behind the tariff make use of marketing flexibility, optimizing self-sufficiency, managing devices at the customer's home, but simplifying that in a very aggressive and very competitive tariff. That's one measure. And one thing we see, and the other thing we see is that if you are able to translate into euros or into dollars, or what's the value, for example, of participating in the flexibility market, and it's in Sweden, it can come up to a couple of hundreds of euros per month if you're lucky, if you have a battery at home. This is something that convinces people to participate. So I think we need to also change the story and invest a lot more into telling people what they get out of it. And this brings me to our customers who are big, usually big energy scale-ups. Yeah? So gridX runs business to consumer models. So many of our customers then have their own brand that they take to their customers, and they use our platform and apps in the background with their own branding to serve their customers. And here our first customers are doing TV ads. This might not sound like a big thing, but if you think back a few years, it was normal to see, like on prime time, TV ads for solar companies and simple offerings that are directed at regular homeowners who are not into the topic. So I think we do see there a change, and luckily many of our customers are leading it.
So recently, I heard a story talking about Germany in particular, that people were tired of legislation pushing a lot of these changes down on them, and that there was a lot of pushback. In fact, one of the parties that's getting a lot of following is because of this, not because of other policy, but because of energy policy in particular. So I guess, how does mom and dad or grandma or whatever, how did they get involved in this? If there's that much pushback, I think it was like 20% of the folks did not like these policies. They didn't want to be forced to have a heat pump installed. They didn't want to have any legislation. So although, I sit here and, pontificate saying Europe, is really into renewable energies and they're ahead, there's actually some data points saying, well, there's a bit of a pushback going on in Germany right now politically. How do we get them involved? How do you get mom and grandma to use an app like this, or do we not need to?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris, and I think it really hurt the overall move towards renewables, that there was also a bad communication, especially beginning of this year in Germany when it came to heat pumps. Yeah, so people got the impression that they need to rip out their current heating system and replace it, even though it might be perfectly fine. Yeah, which was not the plan, at least to what I understood overall. But the damage is done for sure, and and you bring up a very good point, how to especially elderly people, convince them to switch to a new heating system if they say, okay, if this pays off like in 10 years, why should I care? Yeah, so why should I change to a new heating system? So and that is, I think, where we need to make the case that if you combine certain elements like the heating, solar, and electric vehicle charging, then you get a way better case. So get your return on investment sooner. And we also need to combine this with smart financing, and also regulatory incentives, and incentives from the state, for example. So financing is a really interesting topic that has been not looked at so closely over the last couple of years. But some of our customers are looking into this. They call it US style financing. I'm not sure if that's true, but basically you can buy it right now and then you just pay over the next 10 years, yeah, and with quite low rates, yeah. So the entry barrier is a lot lower, and also regulators need to bring way more consistency into how they communicate, also how they provide funds, to make sure that that my mom, for example, or my sister will pick up renewables as well. And just to share there one example from Germany, how it shouldn't be done, at least in my personal opinion. We had some funding put in by the federal government in Germany for EV charging stations. And the website went up, and I think a couple of hours later it was gone already. Yeah, so that leaves people behind really frustrated, and doesn't really create a sustainable momentum of how to do it. So also thinking about how do you set this up, how you create this kind of incentives, how do you also make it as fair as possible, I think is a big part of it as well.
So with your background, obviously working with number of, if I understand it correctly, white labeled and also direct resellers of your platform, or at least distributor of the platform that connects all these new devices into that you can manage. going back to the question in terms of educating a market, which I guess you're extremely interested in, because the more assets you get into the market, the better for you guys, and well, I guess it's better for the transition as well. But I think for me, it's also a little bit in terms of we started in our pre-talk talking about, we come from different areas, we come into this industry to learn more about it. Where do you think the level, when we talk about the energy transition and the level of people's understanding of the energy transition, we talk about EVs, we throw out the acronym of EV. Does everyone knows EV? That's a simple one. Batteries on your in your basement, what is that, as a 9 AAA battery? Is that what we're talking? I'm just thinking sometimes that the energy industry, and we're all kind of part of that one, is almost, we take for granted maybe when we're going to do a bigger transition that everyone understands this. How does that, what do you think about this, and how does that tie into you when you're trying to get more and more players on your platform?
Yeah, when we looked at which of our customers scale fast and which scale not so fast, end of last year, we also try to identify what are the success factors of the ones who are scaling faster. And interestingly, it is, I mean, they all used our technology, yeah? So in our platform, so it couldn't be the technology, yeah? So it is a lot about the overall process of how to do the marketing, but also how to manage and train your installers. Because if I went to a couple of with a couple of installers on site just to see how people who used to install like a gas heating system are now installing a heat pump, which is already a new thing for them, and then solar on top of that. Plus, they all of a sudden also need to deal with an app where they need to configure the energy management system. So, also for installers who are play a key role in rolling this out to customers, there is a big change in what they need to know, how they need to be trained, and also how to address problems that happen in the field. So starting and just to give another example, we also found one case where just changing slightly the rationale in a marketing message of a couple of words can drastically change how the pickup rate of an offer on the website. So what do I want to say with this? It's still an early industry, and we are still learning a lot in how to get it done. And unfortunately, there is not a blueprint to look at how it gets done. So we try to have this learning loop and have it very fast with our customers and try to derive blueprints from that. But it will remain a super fast a super fast learning loop over the next couple of months and years for sure.
So you mentioned that it's early in the industry, and folks are getting used to it. That brings up, I mean, if you're doing demand response type of things, you're going to get some scale. Scale is really what you're playing for, right? So you might use a little bit of the heat equity built up in my house and maybe drop it a little bit or whatever, and nobody would feel it. Have you hit critical mass yet with your application, at least in Germany, where you can make an impact for a utility on demand response right now without my heating getting shut off, where it's not really perceptible to me in my home that you're actually doing demand response?
Yeah, we are moving into critical mass. Just to give an idea, where today we are managing 10,000s of decentralized energy resources with over 30 billion of data measurements processed every month, which is like twice the size of tweets being sent globally each month. And there is one difference, though. What our platform is managing is for sure a critical mass. If you look at this, however, as we are B2B2C, it's also about what our customers are putting as products then to their customers. So when it comes to flexibility marketing, we are having very interesting conversations with our customers how to take that forward, and there we play an enabling role and do usually not go directly to the market, to the wholesale market, for example.
And what is something that has come up through the data that you maybe didn't know when you started this, that the data showed that you were surprised about? Is there anything that the data exposed to you?
I mean, it starts with simple things like just by moving the charging time for your EV by 2 hours during the night, which nobody notices at all, can save you, depending on the country you live in, already significant amount of money, to up to 200, 300 euros per year. And we've also seen that many customers now, as the customer base is growing, are not so much interested into the details. They basically want to know or want to be sure that their car is charged in the morning, that the home is warm when they return in the winter, or it's cool in the summer. And of course, they want to get notified if something happens and that there's something they should take care of. But the data also shows that it's not about providing the last little detailed report, but rather focus on what matters to customers, to have them either assured that everything is working right, or something they need to look at and take care of.
Which I think is interesting. I know we're coming up to time and we can continue talking forever and ever. That's our problem on this show, but it may be also the benefits of the show because we're so interested in this. And I think it was a really interesting discussion in around connecting, the background that we all have in IoT something into the platform, and then start looking at this energy transition with different components getting onto your platform. We talked about EVs, we talked about solar, we talked about batteries. Maybe just as a final question before we wrap up, you've been doing this now for you came on quite recently in this one, but you have a background in similar to roles. Is there anything specific that you see apart from the common areas that we talked about today that you see this will be a next one that you as gridX see that this could be a new opportunity for us? Is there anything that bubbles in the sidelines, so to speak, that you think this might be something that will be the next thing to bring on to the platform?
Yeah. So what is key for us as a multi OEM platform, so we integrate devices from various vendors, is how can we connect even more devices from different OEMs to the platform? And we still lack standardization and standardized interfaces in the industry. So there we are working very hard with our translation language that we basically put on the platform to mitigate that. But the more devices we can bring on the platform, the more value we can create. And what we see there is, which is still early stages, but we see it already coming, is like value stacking of different use cases. So once you are able to stack making money from marketing your flexibility as a homeowner, together with self-sufficiency optimization, it really gets interesting, because then we're adding value pools for the homeowner and for the consumer, which is also quite complex to do from a technology perspective, but it's super exciting, and we already see this developing, and can't wait to see it in our product probably next year.
Well, we look forward to hear it. It was great discussions today. Tobias, thanks a lot for joining Insider's Guide to Energy, and pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Johan. Thanks, Chris, for having me. It was a pleasure.
For our audience, we hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we did making it. It's always interesting to hear insiders tell about their business and what's happening in the industry. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe, follow us on YouTube, and we'll see you again next time on the Insider's Guide to Energy podcast. Bye-bye.